Hello, Patriots. I'm Lee Watts, and this is Patriot Point, your source for Kentucky news and analysis from a conservative, Christian, and common sense point of view. Well, this week we'll be talking about a major attack against parental rights, specifically in the area of on the education front. Now, there might be some people who say, well, listen, Mr. Watts, I don't have any school-age kids, so this really doesn't affect me. Actually, it does, because anytime that we're seeing the government expanding control over any group, really expands government control over us all. Let me just expose the tactic that they use and this agenda for expanding government control. This is the way it works. You isolate one group. Now, everybody else isn't a member of this group. And then you point out some bad players in that group and say, wow, shouldn't the government have control over these bad players? And everybody's going to be like, well, yeah, of course they would. And then later, you isolate a different group. You point to bad players in that group. And now you got everybody says, well, hey, what about that group over there? Well, they're not me. Yeah, let's get control over them. And they just isolate one group after another, point out bad actors, and the government gains more and more and more control. And in a time when we are seeing the benefits of decreasing the size and control of government, we have some Kentucky politicians that are wanting to increase government bureaucracy and control, especially in this issue of who's allowed to educate your children. And should you be allowed to even educate your own kids? We have some Kentucky lawmakers and politicians who are pushing for restrictions on being able to teach your own kids. Some lawmakers, we even have the Harlan County Judge Executive, a guy by the name of Dan Mosley, who's really speaking out against this, wants some new laws in Kentucky this coming year. He put out a social media post, and I just want to go over a few of the things that he talked about in there when he was addressing some homeschool families. He accused these people of, first of all, the parents of abuse, of neglect, drug use, drug trafficking, among other things. Giving this idea that if you're a homeschool parent, you're into all these evil things. I wonder how many public school parents that really could be found guilty of all these particular things, and the audacity to accuse the homeschool parents of these type things, giving this idea that that's what they're guilty of. I want to give you some of the direct quotes from this county judge executive about homeschoolers. Again, this is in his public post talking about some of these homeschool families. Quote, "You're causing them to miss healthy meals," end quote. So I guess if you're a homeschool parent, you don't give your kids any meals of the day. He says, quote, "You're cheating society. You're causing these kids to grow up with no foundation and burdening a future society with people who are not employable and not able to do anything in life."
What? What?
What?
People who are not employable and not able to do anything in life.
What?
So if you homeschool your kids, they're not going to be able to get a job or do anything in life. These are direct word-for-word quotes. He also said about homeschooling, "Stop this nonsense. Send your kids to school. Don't let your struggles, your laziness, or your choices drag them down." These are all direct words from the public post of the Dan Mosley, the Harlan County Judge Executive.
What?
And if it wasn't bad enough that he was doing that, we now have Kentucky state lawmakers who are reposting this, showing their support for these type of comments and how they're going to want to put restrictions on the parental rights of education at home. Now, these statements that we have seen in this public post are, first of all, they're inaccurate, they're highly offensive, they're also hostile, and quite literally, this guy might be sued for libel for this attack upon homeschooling parents here in Kentucky. I personally am both, as my mother would say, sick and tired of these politicians who think that government is the answer for all of our problems. It's like President Reagan said, the government is not the solution to our problems. Government usually is the cause of our problems. So, hey, I just got a message here for County Judge Executive Dan Mosley. You're controlling over there in Harlan County saying, hey, you shouldn't homeschool your kids over here, send them to public school. So I looked up, how's the Harlan County High School doing? This is the one you're in charge of. So I looked it up, and this is what I found. This is on the Kentucky Department of Education's own website on their assessment of his county's high school. You'll see we're going to look at 3 different areas here, both in reading, writing, and arithmetic. 3 main things schools should be focusing on instead of pushing all this DEI stuff. According to the Kentucky Department of Education, in this county where this guy said homeschool is bad, this is how they did in reading. 42% of the kids in his high school can actually read at their grade level or better. That is a failing grade. Only 42% can do it at the level they're supposed to or better. So he's got a 42% in reading in that public high school. That is an F. Let's look at writing. Well, writing, they get a 50-50. So half the kids can write at the level they're supposed to, and the other half can't. 50, by the way, is also an F. You bring home a 50 on a paper, you have failed. Let's see how they're doing in math. Can these kids actually give you change if they graduate from the Harlan County Public High School? Well, 33% of them could, but 67% of them cannot. That is correct. Only 33% of kids in his county school can actually do math at the level they're supposed to. 33% is a hardcore F. The school that he's saying is so much better than homeschooling fails in both reading and writing and in arithmetic. Really think that County Judge Executive Dan Mosley and those politicians pushing for more control of the homeschoolers really ought to be more concerned about their own public schools that they already control and how come they're getting failing grades in reading, writing, and arithmetic. Now, so there's Kentucky lawmakers who are already backing this and looking to place new restrictions upon private schools because under Kentucky law, homeschools are private schools. So any law that restricts them would restrict every secular private school in the state. It would restrict every Christian school. All the church schools would also have all of these restrictions placed on them because all of these are the same in the eyes of the law. They are all defined as a private school. So really, they only want to say, hey, only who the government approves is actually allowed to teach. This is just one step away from saying, hey, whatever the government approves of is the only thing that you're allowed to teach. And if you're somebody who thinks that you're going to try to teach something the state doesn't approve of, well, then you're not qualified to teach. And what happens if they pass a law that says, hey, we're going to place restrictions on who's allowed to teach their own kids with certain qualifications? You know, if they pass that law, what would happen then is a bunch of unelected bureaucrats are going to decide what the standard should be and if you would be allowed to teach your own children or not. And if you're not fitting the qualifications these unelected bureaucrats meet, then you're not allowed to homeschool your kids. You're not allowed to send them to any school. We don't say so. And you'll be forced to send them to the government school. However, all of these things are a violation of the Kentucky Constitution. Notice what Section 5 of the Kentucky Constitution says. Nor shall any man be compelled to send his child to any school to which he may be conscientiously opposed. And if you're conscientiously opposed to the things that the public school system is pushing on these kids and how they're actually failing in reading, writing, and arithmetic in the very county where the guy says, hey, come to my school, you should have to do that, then that would really be a violation of your constitutional rights. The fight for this is already spinning up in the Kentucky State Capitol building, and there's people lining up on both sides of the issue. We've got some state lawmakers that are saying, hey, they're for this. They want to put more restrictions on these things, forcing more people to be disqualified from teaching their own kids and going to public schools. We do have some state lawmakers that are standing up to support and defend educational rights. One of those is State Representative Candy Massaroni, who said, there's been a surge of social media posts lately pushing for more regulation on homeschool families. And I'll say this as clearly as I can. I will fight tooth and nail to stop it. She's not alone in this. There are other state lawmakers who I know will be strong defenders of your parental educational rights. And I also know several state lawmakers who are going to try to do everything they can to ban homeschooling entirely if they could. And the fight is on. So patriots, I always like to say what you can do about it. Here's what you can do about it. You need to contact your senator or representative in Frankfort. Not the guys in D.C. This is a state level battle. The senators or representatives in Frankfort, and let them know that you would like them to support and defend parental rights about education here in Kentucky. As I always say, whenever you contact a politician, Be brief. These people got a lot of people trying to get a hold of them. Don't take up too much of their time. Be brief. Be courteous. If you start your letter, "Dear Dirty Skunk," that is not a way to win friends or influence people. So be brief, be courteous, and ask them to contact you back with what they're going to be doing about it. Now, I have a link here in the description of this video for every single senator and representative in Kentucky listed by county. And you can see their phone number, their email, or their mailing address in the link provided in the description. I hope you will do your part, be brief, courteous, and ask them to contact you back saying, "Support parents and educational rights in Kentucky." And we will be keeping track of this on who is fighting against parental educational rights and who is standing up for it. It's one of the reasons I hope you watch Patriot Point every week so you can get informed on the things that the mainstream media isn't talking about. And yes, we will be calling names and showing pictures during this of both the heroes and the villains in this coming fight. Well, until next week, Patriots, I'm Lee Watts for Patriot Point, reminding you that liberty is not a spectator sport.
What?